Let's bring in Dr. Anthony Fauci now for more on this. Dr. Fauci, thank you for joining us again this morning. You just heard what Whit said about Vice President Pence, but we heard from governor after governor yesterday, including Larry Hogan of Maryland, your neighbor, saying that the governors just don't have what they need now to do the testing they need to do.
Yeah. Well, certainly I can empathize with the governor and believe them. What we need to do is make a better connectivity with the tests that are available, as well as the capacity that in some cases is not used through no fault of the governor or the local people, that there are now should be between 1.5 to 2+ million tests per week. There are people out there who say we need more. We need maybe 2 or 3 times that. We're striving for that goal, but in the meantime, with what we have, if it is used strategically, we feel we'd be able to have most people enter into phase 1 after they pass that 14-day gating period. We know it's a problem, and was just mentioned, there are things that are obstacles in the way that, George, we need a partnership between the federal government and the local people, including the governors, to help them get to things that they maybe not have any access to. So it really does need to be a partnership.
So I was just saying, we know there are some supply chain issues, but you mentioned those experts who believe we need to be doing far more. There's a new study out from Harvard this morning that says we're going to need to be doing something like 5 million tests a day in early June to start opening, up to 20 million tests a day to fully reopen as soon as possible by the end of the summer. We're only doing about 150,000 tests a day right now.
Yeah, we're doing about 1.5 to 2 million per week. We really need to get up to at least, maybe 2 times that, 3 times that. But we will, as we go into the coming weeks, looking forward as regions, states, cities start to go from the gate to the phase 1, and then ultimately, hopefully, to phase 2 and 3. So we're certainly going to need more. I think the issue, George, is that not saying that the people out there are not correct in what they feel they need, because they do need a baseline amount to do the kind of testing that would allow identification, isolation, and contact tracing. If you talk about tests for doing a lot of other things, which ultimately are important, but they're not absolutely critical to get to that situation where you can identify, isolate, and contact trace, there's got to be a meeting of the two. There's got to be more supply, greater access to untapped capacity, which there are. And, the governors do say appropriately, well, maybe there's untapped capacity, but how do we get to it? So we've really got to help them to get to it. And that's what's being done right now, to try to make the connectivity between what's unused capacity as well as tests within that capacity to help them. We've got to keep going, and it's got to be done together, really in a partnership.
Everyone is also wondering about antibody testing. We know that Governor Cuomo here in New York is expanding antibody testing. We've seen that overseas as well. But explain to everyone at home what those antibody tests can show and what they can't show.
Yeah, George, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address that, because there really is a lot of misunderstanding about antibody tests. An antibody test is not saying whether you have the virus now. It's saying whether you were exposed, infected, and likely recovered from the infection. What it is a measure of the proteins in the body that respond to the virus in question. The problem is that these are tests that need to be validated and calibrated. And many of the tests out there don't do that. So even though you hear about companies saying flooding the market with these antibody tests, a lot of them are not validated. Point number 1. Point number 2 that's important is that we do not know exactly what an antibody titer means. I mean, there's an assumption, a reasonable assumption, that when you have an antibody that you are protected against reinfection. But that has not been proven for this particular virus. It's true for other viruses. I think it's a reasonable assumption, so you wouldn't say, that's an absurd idea. It isn't. I mean, it happens with other viruses. But we don't know how long that protection, if it exists, lasts. Is it 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, a year? So the assumption that with the tests that are out there, if you have an antibody positivity, you're good to go, unless that test has been validated and you can show there's a correlation between the antibody and protection, it is an assumption to say that this is something that we can work with. We still have a way to go with them.
And finally, sir, we're seeing these protests crop up all across the country right now, including those protests in Texas and other places where they're saying fire Anthony Fauci. Fauci is wrong. They're resisting these stay-at-home orders from governors. What's your message back to those protesters?
Yeah. I mean, I think the message is that clearly this is something that is hurting from the standpoint of economics, from the standpoint of things that have nothing to do with the virus. But unless we get the virus under control, the real recovery economically is not going to happen. So what you do if you jump the gun and go into a situation where you have a big spike, you're going to set yourself back. So as painful as it is to go by the careful guidelines of gradually phasing into a reopening, it's going to backfire. That's the problem.
Dr. Fauci, thanks for your time again this morning.
Yeah, good to see you, George. Thank you.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.